Okay, so today I'd like to talk about Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer. I've been meaning to talk about this for quite a while. I've been interested in reading him for about a year. I never read him before. I read him about 2 weeks ago, I'd say. And there are quite a number of reviews on Tropic of Cancer, as I'm sure you know. I guess I'm going to add to the fray. Now, it's very difficult for me to do a review of Miller in the sense that there's so much that's good in Tropic of Cancer, and yet it transforms itself into something bad, and then back again, and then back again. I wanted to trash this book. I did a cursory reading of it. I sort of, skimmed it for a while. And I wrote all my notes, which are all negative, and I wanted to trash this book so badly. But when I read it closely, it took me a while. I really can't trash it in good conscience. There's so much that's good about it and so much that's bad about it. So let's get to it. I took a few notes. Oh, wait a minute. I took just a few notes, not too many. And let's see what we can do. Okay, so first of all, as far as what Henry Miller's novel Tropic of Cancer is about, it's about Henry Miller, a down-and-out, destitute writer, expatriate who came from Brooklyn to Paris, and this novel is about his struggles to survive as a writer in Paris in the late 1920s and early 30s. He meets a variety of people there who some of whom take him in. He survives by being taken in by people, kind of mooching off of them, but he develops friendships with them, and that's basically the novel. There is no real plot to it. It's kind of a stream of consciousness. The book is structured to me in the following way. It's basically what I said. He's talking about his reminiscences about being in Paris in the 20s and 30s. And it alternates with these rather long cosmic rants or pontifications. Some of them last for 3 or 4 or 5 pages. Now here's the problem. These rants of Henry Miller's are brilliant. They're mad, they're brilliant. You don't find this kind of ranting very often in books. The problem is that the rants go on for too long, and he doesn't know how to edit himself. And he should have shut up at a certain point, but keeps on going, and the rants sort of become gibberish after a point. Just word salad, I can't follow what he's trying to say, except that he's trying to be very poetical, I suppose. And then, after he descends into gibberish, he goes right back into brilliance again. So it's kind of an alternating thing, which is why it makes it very difficult to knock this novel or to trash it, but it's very difficult to review. So let's look at some of my notes and take it from there. Well, like I said, the rants are good and they're bad. A lot of the ranting that Miller does, I agree with 100%. Miller's take on things, and remember, this was written about 100 years ago. He has one quote in one of his first huge rants. He says, at least 100 years ago, there was a man who had vision enough to see that the world was pooped out. He says our world civilization has had it. We've had our chance, and we blew it. It's pooped out. And, well, I agree with that. Look what's happening now. This is kind of the end, right? You know, it is pooped. And he goes on about how civilization has kind of fallen in on itself very, very brilliantly. He says, just a small line from this brilliant quote, a brilliant rant. He says, when a man appears, the world bears down on him and breaks his back. I mean, that's pretty stupendous, and it's quite true, you know. Anyone who tries to be different, to be an individual, to rise above this crushing system that we live under globally, whatever that is means to you, is usually crushed. That's a wonderful quote. And he goes on in this wonderful vein for quite a few pages. Then, in the same rant, it just goes on too long. Another thing that I like about Henry Miller's rants is that Henry Miller is a kind of a person, he's dirt poor, but he says he's the happiest man alive at the very outset of the book. And I think that what he means by that is that he's one of these rare old souls that's able to accept life on its own terms. He sees the ugliness of life, the hypocrisy, the cruelty, the savagery of life, the confusion of it. He sees what a mess the human race is, as well as seeing the beauty of it. He takes them both in, and he accepts it all. And he's able to live joyfully. And that's rare. He doesn't have any agenda in this book. He's not trying to push a particular philosophy or point of view. And I really do like that, and it's very, very rare. Sometimes in these rants of his, Henry Miller is just not thinking correctly. It's just, he just says very silly, foolish things. For instance, he has one section of the book, not too far into it, where he happens to find a ticket to a classical music concert in a men's room, I guess. So he goes to the concert, and on the concert is Ravel, the composer Maurice Ravel. And he doesn't like Maurice Ravel, or he doesn't like what he hears. He thinks that Ravel, how does he say it? He says that Ravel sacrificed something to form. He finds that Ravel didn't go the full distance. He says art consists in going the full length. If you start with the drums, you have to end with dynamite or TNT. Ravel sacrificed something for form, for a vegetable that people must digest before going to bed. So he thinks that Ravel is too timid. Now, I personally don't know what he's talking about. I don't know whether Henry Miller has ever really listened to Ravel, because Ravel is just the opposite of what he is describing. Has Henry Miller ever listened to Gaspard de la Nuit by Ravel? Has he ever listened to La Valse by Ravel, the symphonic version and the piano version? Well, those are two good examples. I mean, they certainly are not timid, tepid, tame pieces at all. So I don't know where he comes up with this stuff, but he just says this and moves on to his next point. So I find that he has a lot of thoughts in his novel, which I don't think are very well thought out. He has a rant. Here's another one. He's walking along the streets in Paris, and I think he passes a gallery that has this display of the paintings of Henri Matisse. He goes on for about 5 pages talking about Matisse, another rant, most of which I find to be complete gibberish. At the end of his rant about Matisse, he says, in every poem by Matisse, there is the history of a particle of human flesh which refused the consummation of death. I mean, and he keeps going on in this very effusive, poetical manner about Matisse that really just goes off the edge of the cliff to me. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm listening to this stuff, well, if this is what he thinks about Matisse, if he's like having an orgasm over Matisse, what must the man have thought about Rembrandt or Velázquez or Da Vinci, you know? He goes on and finally, at the end of this 4-page rant, I mean, this is hard for me to read and concentrate. He finally says at the end of it, the world of Matisse is still beautiful in an old-fashioned bedroom way. There is not a ball bearing it evidence, nor a boilerplate, nor a piston, nor a monkey wrench. Okay, so he finally gets to it. He finally says what he likes about Matisse. Okay, he could have spared us the 4-page rant ahead of that. Just say it, Henry. Spit it out. He's too fixated on being surrealistic and poetical and metaphorical. He's got to tone that down. Now, another thing that really bugs me about Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer, again, I'm just talking about Tropic of Cancer. I have not read any other book written by Henry Miller. So just this book. In this book, what really gets me also is that Miller seems to be very, very full of himself all the time. He's constantly name dropping all the time. He's just dying to show us what a connoisseur of high culture and literature and art he is. It gets to be kind of pretentious. For instance, he says somewhere in the beginning of his book, he thinks that The Eternal Husband by Dostoevsky is the perfect, what does he say? He says, is there anything more perfect than The Eternal Husband by Dostoevsky? Okay. Care to tell us what you mean by that, Henry? Nope. He just goes straight on. And then he says, but in Van Gogh's letters, there is a perfection beyond either of these, meaning Turgenev and Dostoevsky, this eternal husband. He says in Van Gogh's letters, there is a perfection beyond this. It is the triumph of the individual over art. What do you mean, Henry? What do you mean by this statement about Van Gogh? It's very, very interesting, but care to explain what you mean? He doesn't do that. He just kind of name drops. Maybe he just wants us to know that he's read The Eternal Husband, and he knows who Van Gogh is, and he knows who Turgenev is, and he knows who T.S. Eliot is, and he knows who Balzac is, and Rodin. Then he says he's walking along the street in Paris one day or one evening. I think it's the Avenue of Furstenberg, something like that. And he looks at the trees lining on the avenue, and he says these trees are intellectual trees because they remind him of T.S. Eliot. Well, I don't know what an intellectual tree is. I have trees in my backyard. Are my trees intellectual? Are my trees concupiscent? Are my trees stupid? Are my trees frightened? I have no idea what he means by that. All I know is Henry Miller needed a plug to say that he's read T.S. Eliot, and he does it here. And I find this very pretentious, all of this name dropping. I wouldn't mind him talking about authors and composers and painters so much if he actually talked about them at great length and gave us some kind of fresh insights into them. He talks about Matisse at great length, but most of it is gibberish. So I wish he would just do that once in a while. Give us something of substance when you talk about a writer or any sort of an artist. Oh, here's another thing that I do not like. So he's I mean, if I met Henry Miller at a dinner party, and Henry Miller was talking about T.S. Eliot and Matisse and Balzac and you name it, I would think to myself, what a pretentious jerk, you know? if I met him in a social gathering or something. But he does this all the time in this book, and it sabotages the good stuff. Another thing, I guess I am kind of trashing him more than I'm liking him. Another thing that Henry Miller, he's very full of himself, Henry Miller. I don't know if I've said that, but let's go back to this concert that he attends, where Debussy and Ravel are being played. This is also quite a long passage, and in this passage, he talks about how everybody in the audience is a jerk, except for him. You know, everybody in the audience is just kind of bored, and you know, they don't have any thoughts of their own. They're just kind of killing time. They're all kind of dumb, basically, but not him. You see, he's alive. He's so alive. He says, hold on a second. Okay, yeah, everybody is dumb. But then he says about himself, as he's sitting there, nothing escapes me. Every pore of his body is a window. And then he has like a period of semi-unconsciousness. And then he feels a great calm while he's listening to the music. He goes through this whole psychedelic trip while he's listening to Ravel and Debussy at the concert. And only he has this kind of amazing sensitivity. Everybody else there is just, forget it. They're nothing, you know. Okay. Oh, here, for instance, one very brief one. He says, you know, the conductor raps his baton, and they, meaning the audience, fall back into a cataleptic state. They're all zombies to him, everybody but Henry, okay? This is what I'm talking about. Oh, I kind of touched on this already, but he's always making these ridiculous generalizations, Henry Miller. He made some kind of ridiculous generalization about Ravel, how Ravel sacrifices something to form. He sort of gets swept away with his own verbiage at times, interlaced with his brilliance. I mean, the guy is not a hack. He knows how to write, but he gets way too full of himself all of the time. Okay, next point I want to make about Miller. When he's not ranting, Miller is basically telling all of these stories about the different characters he's met, who put him up, and who feed him, you know, and give him money, and who he goes to prostitutes and whorehouses with. Now, some of these stories are very good. They're very entertaining and they're very witty, and I like them. For instance, he talks about his friend Carl, and Carl corresponds with, he refers with a woman that I think Carl or Miller, or both of them, refer to as that rich cunt, Irene. So he talks about how Carl corresponds with this woman without having seen her, and Carl's very excited about the prospect of seeing her. And then Carl finally does meet her, you know. And there's this long section where he talks about, there's a whole story of Carl finally meeting that rich cunt, Irene. And it's a good story, you know. It's funny. It's good. Then Miller, you know, that basically doesn't work. You know, he kind of mooches off of people, but he does get a job as a proofreader for a while. And this is also very, very funny, and it's very, very entertaining, and I like it. You know, he says that he has one line here when he's a proofreader, the world is brought right under my nose, and all that is requested of me is to punctuate the calamities. That's pretty good, you know. It's very witty and it's very true. It's wonderful. So that's good. However, again, this novel has no plot. And then he has some stories which I just had to whip myself. I had to whip myself to read. For instance, he has a long passage where he's long number of pages where he talks about how he becomes a teacher at a school for boys in Dijon. It's a very long section, and I didn't really care for any of it. I thought it was rather boring. And then he meets, later on in the novel, this is toward the end, he meets this character named Fillmore. and Fillmore gets entangled with a woman, Jeanette, and he goes on about Fillmore and Jeanette, and I just didn't find it particularly memorable. So so I find Miller very spotty when he comes to his storytelling. This is the thing. I mean, I've read Humboldt's Gift by Saul Bellow. Now, Humboldt's Gift has a plot. There are many characters in it, just like there are in Tropic of Cancer. But the stories that Saul Bellow talks about, tells in Humboldt's Gift, are much, much more interesting and memorable. And part of the reason is because it's going someplace. There's a plot to the novel, which there isn't here. So it's very, very hard to maintain your interest in these random reminiscences of Miller. Now let's talk about the sex, the famous sex, which got Tropic of Cancer banned, for so many years. Now I count Henry Miller using the word cunt 72 times in Tropic of Cancer. I could be wrong. Maybe he uses the word cunt 80 times or 85 times, or maybe it was 60 times. I did the best I could to keep a count on it. And something, of course, it's dehumanizing. It's insulting to women. But here's the thing about it. After a while, after the 30th or 40th or 50th cunt, I mean, can you take this seriously? He's being so deliberately provocative that it becomes kind of funny. He's being so purposely over the top. So it's also hard for me to get righteously indignant about his profanity when he talks about women, because it's like I say, it's just completely over the top. So I mean, that's how I felt about it. Okay. So that's it. I guess that's it. So it's a mixed bag with Bruckhaus, with Henry Miller. He has brilliant flashes. The guy obviously has great verbal facility. When he, like Bukowski said, actually he says when he's good, he's good, and when he's not, not. And that's how I feel about it too. Would I read Tropic of Cancer again? Hell no. It was brutal for me having to force myself to read through all of these word salad pontifications of his. I'm not going to read it again. I just know I'm not going to read it again, and I'm not going to read anything else by Henry Miller either. Is he one of the 20 or 30 great writers of the 20th century? I don't know. I haven't read that many books. I'm not in a position to judge. All I know is I've read a lot better than him. Saul Bellow comes to mind. So the question is, why is Miller? By the way, Bukowski is often, compared to Miller, and they're not, aside from the fact that they were both down and out and penniless, starving writers, that's where the similarity ends. Their writing styles are completely different. Bukowski has a much, much sharper, clearer, more concise style than Miller does. He's just very different. But anyway, so these are my conclusions. Why has Tropic of Cancer become this icon of 20th century literature? I have a few theories about it. Now, my first theory is that, maybe people, when they were young, were just exploring sex, learning about sex, and they happened to stumble across Tropic of Cancer at the same time. And since Miller talks about sex so openly and jubilantly, maybe they just associate that wonderful period in their life when they were learning about sex with Tropic of Cancer. They conflate the two, and maybe that's why they look upon it with admiration. Who knows? It's in the same way that Jack Kerouac. Now, a lot of people, Jack Kerouac, I agree with Truman Capote. Jack Kerouac is just a typist. I find nothing great about Jack Kerouac. But, a lot of people, went on a road trip across the country when they were young, read Jack Kerouac, and so they conflate the two. They had a good time. It reminds them of their youth. Jack Kerouac, great writer. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I'm sure it's true with many, many people. My second theory. Some people like Norman Mailer and George Orwell were gaga for this book, Tropic of Cancer. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, maybe, sometimes if you just, maybe talking dirty, saying the word cunt was such a novelty to these people that they just got bowled over, and they fell in love with it just on that basis. I don't know. I really don't. That's another theory I have. Sometimes if you talk dirty, that seems to be a mark for some people that there must be some greatness in you. The other theory I have, and I'm going to end right after this, the other theory I have, which I think is the most plausible, is that, like I say, Miller's a very brilliant writer at times, but very sloppy, very unedited. He rambles a lot. And I think a lot of people, particularly young people, would love to write, but they don't have the verbal ability. They don't have the skill to do it. And they see a guy like Miller in Tropic of Cancer who kind of rambles on a lot of the time, is very sloppy, doesn't edit himself, and they think, well, shit, if Miller could do it, and look how famous he is, I guess I can too. I think that's part of the appeal of Henry Miller's Tropic of Cancer to a lot of people as well. But whatever the reason is, one thing is for sure. In our culture, once an icon, always an icon. In other words, once you're in the art books or in the Norton Anthology of Literature, once they put you in there, you're in. You'll never get kicked out. It's like you're the Lincoln Memorial. They're never going to tear it down. Like, take Andy Warhol. Now, Andy Warhol, to me, is not a great artist. I am not interested in soup cans. I'm not interested in being told by Andy Warhol that we live in a world which is completely commercial. The individual is dead. All you have to look forward to is perhaps 15 minutes of fame and the commercialism of impersonal soup cans and so on. It doesn't do anything for me at all. I don't consider him a great artist or possibly even an artist. He does have a couple of really great quotes. The 15-minute quote is great. He had another quote. I think somebody said, what's the definition of art, Andy? And Andy said, whatever you can get away with. And that's beautiful. Andy Warhol is by no means a philosopher, but he's got a lot of good quotes, But anyway, whether I like him or not, Andy Warhol is now in all of the art books. He's in there, and he ain't going anywhere. Like I say, once an icon, always an icon. And I expect that the same is going to be true of Henry Miller too, with Tropic of Cancer. Okay? He's now famous. It's a staple of modern literature, and I guess it always will be till hell freezes over. And all I was able to do is give you my 2 cents about it. So that's it. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. Thanks a lot.